So great. So the first question I want to ask you both, and I'm going to ask you, Jackie, first. So from your experience coaching through this pandemic, what are leaders struggling with right now? What are the real challenges that are coming up in your coaching conversations? And Jackie, if you could start and kick us off, please.
I think that's a great question. And what sits with me is what aren't leaders focusing? What aren't leaders challenged by at this particular time? I have not stopped coaching since we started and we've entered into this space of the global pandemic. And I've seen everything in the coaching conversations, from how do I build and how do I really connect to my resilience when we are in such a challenging time. You know, people have lost jobs, people have lost close ones in the most tragic of circumstances. I have lost my best friend to breast cancer in the middle of the pandemic, had to organise her funeral, had to be part of her 9-night and also part of her estate, and still show up for my job in a way that means that I am very present and very alive and very engaged in this time of great difficulty, and really helping people to recognise that there is both beauty in the grief that we are experiencing at this time. So resilience has been a number one contender around how we really root ourselves in this space at this time. There's been lots of conversations around work-life balance. Isn't it extraordinary that we are now working from home and at home for most people? And whereas we may have imagined that we would have had less time, we would have had more time because we're working from home, what people are finding is that they are working significantly longer hours. I have had countless conversations, Jenny, around the lack of sleep that people are not having at this time. Sleep seems to be the number one thing. And I know that very early on in my work, I introduced the work of Tricia Hersey, who has she's called the Nap Bishop. She's done a huge amount of scientific research around what she calls rest as resistance. And for me, I think this conversation about sleep is telling us about how we are mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually at this particular time, because all of these things are impacting on our mental health and our well-being, our emotional resilience, our physical resilience. So all of these things are creeping into our conversations, and particularly around how can creativity actually thrive in this time when we're having to work differently, when we're having to respond to not being in our working environments, not having all the things around us that we're used to having. How can we bring our best selves to the table? I feel like I've done my best work between March 2020 and where we are right now, because I feel like I've been challenged, I've been stretched. I've been having a real hard time personally, but professionally, it feels like that part of myself has absolutely rooted itself. And I've been able to show up, not just for myself, but for other people in a way that is really wholehearted. So for me, those are some of the key things. And I think we have to hold in mind that stress is a killer. It's silent. And I think we're having more conversations about the impact of stress in a very meaningful and purposeful way. I think that's very healthy for us right now. Yeah, I think I'll leave it there and let Jess add to this. I can see Jess nodding away there.
Yeah, I think some of the things you just said are really interesting. You've been challenged most, but you've also done some of your best work.
Oh, yeah.
And the fact that although stress is a killer, stress can also push us to be in our best place. You know, there's something called eustress, good stress, that gets us to that point of doing our best. And I think our clients are really showing up as themselves in order for us to do that best work with them as well.
I think you're absolutely right. It's that tipping point, isn't it, Jenny? The tipping point between the good stress and the bad stress. And you're absolutely right. For me, I love my clients. I feel like I get to sit in front of an exquisite human being in all of their brokenness, in all of their wonderfulness, every single day. That to me is a splendid gift to be part of.
Thank you. Thank you. And Jess, the same question, what are leaders struggling with right now from your experience?
Jenny, I mean, I would really echo what Jackie's just said about the balance and the boundaries. I think it's been really highlighted that whilst, yes, working at home is great and having a degree of flexibility, actually, for some who are not used to working from home, it's finding that balance and, when to stop, when does work life stop and when does home life start? And also that need to really almost like prove that you're working, which then means that the boundaries get really blurred, because if you're at home, if something comes in the evening, what's to stop you just quickly logging on and having a look or dealing with it there and then? But I think specifically some of the leaders I'm working with are really struggling with the working online and not having the human contact. Not having their teams around them, not being able to read body language, not being able to read the room, and having to rely on this screen relationship with many of the people that are working with them and around them. And I think that's been quite a challenge and quite something that they've had to really adapt to that. You're having to put everything into a screen, particularly when you're dealing with people. I think that's been a big challenge.
Yeah, thank you, Jess. I think this idea of how do I really show up on screen? How can I convey everything that is me, the essence of me here? It's really tough, actually. Some people have thrived in it. Some people have opted out in a way. You've seen some people just disappear, shrivel up. I'm not going to put my camera on. I can't convey my personality. One of my clients described it as speaking another language. That if you learn to speak another language and you go to that country, or and you read their poetry, for example, in another language, it's something is lost in translation. And he said it's for him, just actually talking through the screen, something is lost in that translation between the screen and the other person that he missed so much, that he's actually chosen not to prioritize work anymore when it was a big part of his life, because he feels the loss. And Jackie talked about grief and loss. There's more than one kind of loss, isn't there? There's the loss of people, which is awful, and grieving them, but there's also for some people the loss of the way things were, that they're feeling really acutely.
Yeah, I agree. But particularly networking is a big part of what you do as a leader. And so there's something artificial about trying to network through the screen, whereas if you're in an office environment, you can stop by somebody's desk, you can nip out for a coffee. And so I think that there's that morning of, well, how am I actually going to be able to build relationships and network again if I'm trying to, set up these Zoom or Microsoft Teams or whatever it is meeting?